Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast with our next guest up, our two-hole hitter here, Steve Merril, at Steve Merril on Twitter. Check him out at WagerTalk.com. Steve, welcome in. How you feeling today, buddy?
I like it, Drew. Great to be back. I did some 3 and 4 spots for you earlier this season, and I got some power, but I got some speed also, so I think the 2 spot is ideal for my talents.
Absolutely, man. And, slap some singles, maybe steal a base, be a problem out there, and find some winners. That's what we're all about, guys, is we're hitting every single game on the board. If you're new to the Every Game on the Board podcast, we hit every single game on the college football weekend slate. And for this section, we got Steve doing rotation number 199 to 199-200 down to 234 here. So if you go to the Wager Talk live odds screen, go to college football, those little numbers next to the team name, that is the rotation order, and we are going down in numerical order. Starting off here, 199-200, 7:30 Eastern kick, Notre Dame and USC here. We got playoff implications to start and a big game, rivalry game as well, Steve. 64.5 being the total. We're seeing the Trojans minus 5.5 point home favorites. You liking anything in the Coliseum?
Well, I mean, the first thing that jumps out to you, Drew, is that you're getting the underdog Notre Dame, the much better defensive team, and it's statistically true. I mean, they give up 20 points a game. USC gives up 26, but they give up over 6 yards per play, 6.1 against teams that average just 5.6. Notre Dame gives up just 5 against teams that average 5.8. So you're talking about a substantially better defensive edge here for Notre Dame. But I'm going to look at the total here. I like the over. USC, 5 straight overs, not a surprise. Good offense, bad defense. But Notre Dame has gone over 5 straight as well. It all coincides since they lost to Stanford and only put up 14 points back in mid-October. They have quietly scored 35 or more in 5 straight games, 41 or more in 3 of those 5, and gone over all 5. So I like the over in this one. We do get the defensive dog, but I think there'll be some points.
Man, so 10 combined overs between the two of these. Yeah, it's almost surprising to see this number at 64. We have seen a little bit of a punch up from the opener, 62.5, but still not that high of a total considering nowadays in college football. We got the Apple Cup up next. Great time slot too, 10:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, 201-202 Washington at Washington State. Competitively priced game here, Steve. -1.5, -2, depending where you're shopping. 60.5 being the total. Pullman, Washington, the site of the Apple Cup.
Yeah, and Drew, I love how you explain the rotation numbers because you and I have been doing this for decades, but we do have a lot of new viewers. Sports betting is becoming legal in every state as we speak, basically, and people might say, why is this game at 10:30 Eastern in the middle of the schedule, right? Well, that's what we call a time change because the rotation comes out several months ahead of time. And a lot of times these games are moved for national TV reasons. And this game will be the ESPN primetime. As Drew Martin likes to say, they bailout special. And for all you new sports bettors out there, by the way, terrible betting strategy to do the bailout special. Do not let Drew talk you into that. All things serious, though, here.
To each his own.
What's that?
To each his own.
To each his own. What could go wrong, right? You still got Sunday NFL after this one. But yeah, this is the primetime late night game. And look, Washington Huskies 9-2. Washington State 7-4, so this is one of the better Apple Cups that we've had in recent years. And both teams in are pretty hot. The Huskies have won 4 straight, covered back-to-back games after 5 straight non-covers. Washington State 3 straight wins, but 4 straight covers. So Washington State's actually been the hotter point spread team, and I do think that's why we've seen a little bit of money come in on State as a home dog. Open 2.5 down to 1.5 won. This total has also risen from 58.5 up to 60.5. And let's look at the defensive numbers again. Both teams above average defensively. Washington State is actually below average offensively. So it does look like the Washington Huskies are the better team. Just wonder what they have left in the tank. That the big upset of Oregon did not let down against Colorado last week. And Drew and I talked about this on the Wednesday show on WagerTalk TV. Last week was letdown week of the century with all the teams. Yet the Washington Huskies did not do so. Took care of business 54-7 against Colorado as a 30-point favorite. I think that's a good sign that they're going to play well again this week as well.
Heading to the Lone Star State up next. Tulsa at Houston, 67 being the total. 7:30 Eastern kick here. -12. That's Houston as the home favorite. Watch the weather here, guys, throughout Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana. Looks to be a little system. High total here, Steve. Not sure if it will affect Houston too much. Tulsa at Houston, next game up.
Yeah, if you recall, Houston was 2-3 heading into that Memphis. I believe it was a Friday night game in early
Yeah.
October, and I remember Dave Koken and I talked about this on Wager Talk today. I was hosting that night or that afternoon, and he said if they lose this game to Memphis, all bets are off. They're going to tank it the rest of the season. I remember they were down most of that game. They had the remarkable comeback, Drew, if you remember, 33-32 to win as a slight dog. Then they went into their bye week, and it really changed the season. They lose that game, I think they probably go like 1-4 the last 5. They're now 5-1 their last 6, including that comeback win. So they are still playing hard. This is a team that expected better than 7-4, but they're playing up to their level finally. Meanwhile, Tulsa is just a falling knife. And as Drew and I know, we do not catch falling knives. All the that are new to the financial markets as well as the sports betting markets, do not try to catch falling knives. Thanksgiving, do not try to catch a falling knife as well. Tulsa has failed to cover 7 straight games. Not a team I want to back anytime soon, Drew Martin.
Yeah, well done there with the falling knife, working in Thanksgiving weekend, Steve. One of the best in the industry. 205, 206, Memphis and SMU up next. 3:30 Eastern here. We get Mustangs -4 in the hook at home. High total again here, Steve. Speaking of the Memphis Tigers, 69 being the total at SMU.
Yeah, and speaking of the Memphis Tigers, I just talked about that Houston-Memphis game on October 7th, in which Memphis basically blew the win. Guess what? They went 0-3 straight up the next 3 games after that, 1-2 against the number. So it just shows how short-term a game like that can really, sway the momentum for both teams. However, Memphis has started to play better football, and maybe we did get the buy sign. Maybe that knife has bottomed and hit the kitchen floor the last couple of weeks because they won and covered against Tulsa and North Alabama 85-10. We'll see if that was the buy sign or not. Obviously, SMU is a step up in class, but it does look like Memphis is starting to play well again.
Next game up, 207, 208. We're making our way down in rotation order. 4 o'clock Eastern, Big 12 game. Playoff implications. Iowa State at TCU. We're seeing the Horned Frogs undefeated on the season. Just 2 games left here before they punch their ticket to the playoffs if they're able to win here, Steve. Now, we're talking about it from a betting perspective, so they're going to have to win by doubles here. -10-point favorites, 47.5 being the total. TCU hosting Iowa State.
Yeah, it cracks me up if anybody's looking at the WagerTalk live odds screen, which I recommend doing because I'm using it right now. We all use it. It's a great source. The new bettors might be confused, Drew, because it says Texas Christian on the live odds screen. It cracks me up because I don't think anywhere else they really put Texas Christian too much. But that is TCU, Texas Christian University, and boy, are they the spoilers this year, right? I mean, a lot of the power ratings I run do not even have them top 15 right now in my math models, but they still find ways to win. I tried to fade them a couple weeks ago with Texas. Not only did Texas lose that game outright, I mean, not only did they not cover, they lost outright as over a touchdown favorite. Baylor last week against TCU, TCU only a 2-point favorite in that game. They have to rush the field goal unit on with no time remaining, basically, and they kick that field goal to win. It's like, how many lives does this Horned Frog have? I know cats have 9 lives. How many lives do Horned Frogs have? Because they're using a lot of them to stay alive. You do wonder if this is the game that gets them, right? Because on the surface, like you said, they're double-digit favorite. Iowa State's lost 6 of their last 7 outright. But this is not a bad Iowa State team. They're a lot better than their 4-7 record. On the season, they're allowing just 16.5 points per game, 4.7 yards per play. They're getting double digits here. I'm not going to be bold and call for the outright upset, but it would not shock me. I still don't believe TCU is going to be in that Final Four playoff just because they don't deserve to be, and normally it works itself out. You wonder if this is the week that it works itself out finally.
Well, see, I mean, you've been doing this successfully for quite a while. Like, every now and again in college football, we get runs like this from do you find yourself getting involved? Because if you've been betting against TCU, you've lost a lot of money. I mean, throughout the course of the season, do you find yourself like, we're going to go against them here, or do you just kind of stay away, or do you actually ride streaks like this?
They're not a bad team. I mean, they're still like a top 15 team out of 130 teams, right? So it's not like what they're doing is insane, but they're not one of the 4 best teams. And Baylor, especially Texas, I thought was a better team. But Texas was a flawed commodity, right? They'd lost, 3 games already. Their season had kind of tanked. So in hindsight, not a surprise that they lost outright. Baylor's mediocre. TCU's probably better than Baylor. Horned Frogs are good on both sides of the ball. They're putting up almost 40 points a game. So when you can score, good things happen. But we saw that with Tennessee last week, right? Tennessee, the best offensive team in football this year, scored 30-some again, but they gave up over 60 to a mediocre South Carolina squad. You just feel like at some point this mediocre TCU defense, by the way, which allows almost 50% more than Iowa State allows on the season, yet they're laying double digits. So something's going to happen at some point. It might happen this week.
Next game up, 209, 210, 3:30 Eastern, UAB and Louisiana Tech. Minus 17 in the hook. That's the Blazers on the road, 55 being the total in Ruston, Louisiana.
Yeah, one team that really benefited, well, there's a couple teams that really benefit from Tennessee's loss last week, and that, of course, is Michigan, Ohio State, because I think whoever loses that game Saturday will still get in probably, whereas Tennessee might have passed them. The other team, though, that really benefited was LSU, because with one loss being to Tennessee, they can now pass them if they win out. And the reason I bring that up is because UAB played LSU last week, and on the surface, the 41-10 win by a top 10 team, LSU didn't seem anything special, but keep in mind, LSU was only a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. This is a very good UAB team that was only a 2-touchdown dog to one of the best teams in the country on the road last week. So this is a huge step down in class now for Louisiana Tech. And as long as they're not too banged up and beat up from that big SEC game, they should step up and bounce back this week with a nice win.
Big 12 up next, Oklahoma, Texas Tech. We're seeing the Sooners -2 road favorites, 63.5 being the total. In Lubbock, Red Raiders hosting the Sooners.
Yeah, it's funny, we're talking about TCU earlier. One example I keep using when I talk about Alabama is when they played TCU a couple months ago. Halfway through that game, TCU had 5 touchdowns of 60 yards or longer. So, once again, that is a very explosive TCU offense, but it's also a very shaky Oklahoma team this year that's now just 6-5. They did become bowl eligible with that rival win against Oklahoma State last week. And by the way, I did have Oklahoma as a strong best bet for my clients, part of this current 12-2 all sports run the past week at WagerTalk.com. So I liked the setup last week for Oklahoma. I do think they're a little bit undervalued. My concern here, though, Drew, would be do they take their foot off the gas a little after beating their rival and getting bowl eligible?
You brought up LSU before. LSU at Texas A&M, a little bit of a rivalry here. We're seeing the Bayou Bengals laying doubles on the road, -10, most sports books, 47.5 being the total in College Station. You liking anything Tigers versus the Aggies?
So 9-2 LSU is now 5th in the playoff rankings because Tennessee lost, as I mentioned. They dropped from 5th to 10th. USC is 10-1, and we just talked about that Notre Dame game, a tough game. USC could still pass all these teams. Of course, we probably need TCU to lose, as we talked about. But LSU is still alive to make the Final Four. Alabama picking up that second loss. Tennessee getting their second loss obviously was huge. With that said, this is not a easy game against A&M. A&M's been one of the biggest underachievers this season. Did you see that shot last week? They were doing a towel relay in the stands. There was absolutely nobody in the upper section of the entire stadium. It's been a disappointing season. You got to wonder, though, is this Texas A&M's bowl game? At 4-7, it is, because they're not going to have a bowl game. And these are always the dangerous type of opponents. LSU just needs to win. They don't necessarily need to win by 10 or more. This is basically the bowl game for Texas A&M this week.
Steve Merril, you mentioned the 12-2 hot run at WagerTalk.com. NFL plus NCAA football, 68-44, plus 72% profit so far this year. And if you're looking for an NBA handicapper as well, he obviously knows his college football. Check him out for that. Check him out for the NFL and also the NBA, guys. Number 2 ranked NBA handicapper at WagerTalk.com, going 132-98 in sides last year. Association going on, and we're going to have a little bit of break here with college football. Maybe check out NBA. And if you're looking for a handicapper, Steve Merril, one of the better ones out there, WagerTalk.com, experts page, Steve Merril. Steve, I want to ask you before we get to West Virginia, Oklahoma State, you seem to be up to date with the rankings. Do you think they're going to have a little bit of a problem here if TCU does lose and LSU somehow runs the table? That would put LSU, Georgia, possibly, and then Ohio State and Michigan. So we'd have 2 teams from the Big Ten and 2 teams from the SEC. Do you think it would actually go that way? Or would they be like, all right, guys, we got to do something, blow this up. Let's bring USC in. We need a Pac-12 representative. How do you think that would actually play out?
Yeah, I think USC is the team that's really kind of sitting pretty if they take care of business. And obviously the win against Notre Dame would be a solid win, which would bump them a little bit stronger. The one thing I don't like, there's a lot of things I don't like about the playoff rankings. First of all, I don't see why there's not at least 8 teams, instead of 4. But, it's partial polls, partial committee, partial computer rankings. And when they come out the first rankings a month ago with Tennessee number 1, both of the polls had Georgia number one, the coaches poll and the AP, and they had Tennessee 2 and 3 in those polls, which means the math model on the committee was ranking Tennessee even higher than the poll element. Yet in my power ratings, they were like more than a touchdown dog to Georgia. In fact, my math model was 11. I had a best bet on Georgia in that game. Georgia won by double digits. So it does make you wonder what the committee's looking at when they come out and basically have Tennessee higher with their metrics than the overall polls do. So I don't know. I mean, and I think there's always some room for some shenanigans, as I like to say. Got to imagine they don't really want TCU in this picture, but if TCU goes undefeated, it's hard to say they don't deserve to be there.
All right, guys, getting back to the rotation numbers, 215, 216, West Virginia, Oklahoma State. We're seeing Cowboys, Steve, -8 in the hook at home, 64 being the total in Stillwater.
Yeah, just talked about Oklahoma State a minute ago. We talked about Oklahoma State last week. It was a huge rival game. We normally have the big rival games this week. They played last week. And yes, Oklahoma State lost. We do wonder if they're a little bit hungover still from that loss. This is a team that's 7-4 in the season, 8-4, 7-5. Probably not going to change their bowl seasons too much at this point. What's interesting, though, is the offense is really struggling right now. They've gone under 4 straight, and it's been because of their offense. They have scored 16 points or less in 3 of those 4, 20 or less in all 4 games. And keep in mind, they only put up 13 points at Oklahoma last week, and that's that same Oklahoma Sooner team I mentioned earlier. Gave up 5 touchdowns of 62 yards or longer in the first half against TCU. So Oklahoma State's got some offensive problems right now, and I think West Virginia, a team that's put up 23 or more in 3 of their last 4, could maybe take advantage and keep it close.
Hawaii, San Jose State up next. We're getting the Rainbow Warriors on the mainland, -15. That's the Spartans at home, 57.5 being the total here, Steve.
Yeah, Hawaii's always an interesting team to handicap. I know you love your late night degenerate specials, and the textbook example of that's the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors at home at 11:59 p.m. Eastern on a lot of games. But this one is a road game, so it's a more manageable 3:30 Eastern kickoff, which would be about noon. Actually, I guess they don't do daylight, so it's what is it? It's a 1:30 Pacific or 1:30 Hawaiian time kickoff. You do worry about the travel situation, though. This is only the second time they've traveled since mid to late October. They were at Fresno. They lost 55-13. They did cover at Colorado State, but Colorado State's really down this year. Did cover against San Diego State. We'll see. Normally not a Hawaii team that travels too well, but I'm not sure I want to be in a hurry to lay double digits with San Jose State either.
Steve, man, the underdog that's barking here, the Vanderbilt Commodores at home in Nashville. Now, granted, there'll be a lot of Volunteer fans there. 64 being the total, -14, that's the Volunteers. Talk about two teams over the last, 2 or 3 weekends that have gone in exactly opposite orders. This is the game here. Vanderbilt, one of the teams, there's a bunch of them this weekend, Steve. I think there's, I don't know the number, but there's a lot with 5 wins. Having to win to punch a bowl ticket. Vanderbilt being one of them. Do they have it in them? 2 touchdown underdogs. Can they win outright? What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, basically this is Vanderbilt's bowl game because they're likely not going to win outright. But you could also say Kentucky and Florida were their bowl games, right? Because they were just 3-6 at that point. Thought they had no chance to win out 3 straight. Now they have a chance. But their best chance here, Drew, is if Tennessee just is flat after that terrible loss last week against South Carolina. A loss that very well knocks them out of the it does knock them out of the national title picture, but they probably controlled their own destiny because if TCU was to pick up a loss, Tennessee would have been the first team to leapfrog, and they didn't even necessarily need that because they could have maybe leapfrogged either Michigan or Ohio State, whoever loses that game on Saturday. So that was a devastating, season-changing loss last week, and the fact they gave up 63 points is really concerning. It's interesting. This total opened 67. It's down to 64. We did see Tennessee open 17. It's down to 14. We have to keep an eye on the weather, of course, this time of year. But it's hard to trust Vanderbilt's defense if Tennessee shows up. Vanderbilt on the season is giving up almost 7 yards per play, 34 points a game. Tennessee is still probably the most explosive offense in college football this year. If anything, maybe a Tennessee team total is the best way to play this. And if Tennessee does come up a little bit flat, this game probably gets over the total as well.
Speaking of another team with 5 wins, wanting to punch a bowl ticket, 3:30 Eastern on CBS, SEC Game of the Week, Auburn at Alabama, -22. That's the Alabama Crimson Tide, 50 being the total in Tuscaloosa. What are we thinking in the Iron Bowl, Steve?
Yeah, one thing I probably should have mentioned earlier during these games, we're all talking about a lot of rival games, and something that I've used for 20 plus years is you always want to look at rival dogs as a default, right? And then you dig deeper and you find if there's reasons to play them. But teams normally do step up as rival dogs. This game is interesting, though, Drew, and I'll get your feel on this too, because I know you follow these teams very closely. Is Alabama going to be disappointed because the season basically they're not playing for a national title? But because of that, do they take this rival game maybe more serious than they normally would have in the past? If they're just playing out the schedule here undefeated, I think Auburn's more of a live dog for that reason. Auburn has somewhat turned their season around. I use that term loosely, but if they win here, they do get bowl eligible. Don't see that happening as a big, 3-touchdown dog, but they have covered 3 straight back-to-back wins as small favorites against A&M and Western Kentucky. Not going to read too much into that, but they were only a 4.5-point favorite. Western's a pretty good team. Huge step up in class here, and I just get a sneaking suspicion that Saban is going to rally the troops and have Alabama focused for this game after a somewhat disappointing season. And also, don't forget, Alabama's been a lot better at home. Their problems, including this year, have come on the road.
Interesting take. Okay, I could see it. So you would lay the 22 with Bama?
Yeah, it's an ugly number, over 3 touchdowns. And obviously whenever we get to this point, you worry about backdoor cover potential. And Auburn average throwing the ball. They haven't been that great in recent weeks. So, the backdoor cover potential probably isn't quite there.
Yeah. We got a great alphabetical matchup up next, guys. UTEP versus UTSA. That's UTEP, UTSA here. Roadrunners minus 17 at home, 56 being the total in the Alamo Dome.
2 great nicknames, too. The Miners and the Roadrunners. Beep, beep. Of course, that's one of my all-time favorites with UTSA, Texas San Antonio, who's, the last couple of years, they've been a play-on team for a lot of sharp handicappers. They had like 20 returning starters a couple of years ago. Really, a lot of guys that have a lot of experience, and they're off to a 9-2 season this year. 6-5 against the number, so I think the secret is kind of out. But this is a bigger game for UTEP. They can become bowl eligible. They're 5-6, so they need the win here. And unlikely to happen as a double-digit dog. So once again, the question becomes, can they keep it close? They don't throw the ball well. They average just 6.7 yards per pass against teams that allow 7.4. I think UTSA pulls away, and I'm not sure UTEP can catch up when they get behind in this one.
Couple games left here to finish off the Saturday card. We'll bring in Tony Mejia and then Kelly Stewart to finish off the Every Game on the Board podcast. We got our 2-hole hitter here, Steve Merril on Twitter at Steve Merril, 2 R's. 1L. Also check out his videos, guys. Public and Sharp Divide in the NFL. He does a great video there. And college football top 25. Breaks down the games where the money's coming in on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. NFL and NCAA football. He's 68-44 plus 70% profit in 2022. And if you're looking for an NBA handicapper, number 2 NBA handicapper, insides last year, 132-98, the wins and the losses in the association. We got 3:30 Eastern up next. Troy and Arkansas State, Steve, minus 13.5. That's the Trojans on the road, 45 being the total in Jonesboro, Arkansas.
Yeah, Troy having a solid season, 9-2 straight up. Arkansas State not having a solid season, 3-8 straight up. But they are 7-4 against the number, Drew. They've had one of the biggest dichotomies between straight up record and points per record. And it's kind of weird. They actually are a pass-based offense, so I guess that makes sense. They don't run the ball well at all, very poorly actually. The problem, though, is that Troy has an excellent pass defense, really an excellent defense overall, 16.5 points per game. 4.5 yards per play. So I think the backdoor cover probably a little less likely for Arkansas State in this game like they've done in some others.
Southern Miss and UL Monroe up next. We get Southern Miss minus 3-point road favorites, 51 being the total. Monroe, the Warhawks catching 3. They've improved this year, Steve.
Yeah, and this is an important game for Southern Miss because at 5-6, they need the win to become bowl eligible. And as you said, they are a field goal road favorite here, so it's a very winnable game. They've also been an excellent point spread team. Despite going 5-6 straight up, they're 8-3 against the number, 7-4 to the over. And one thing that they do fairly well is a little bit of everything. Throw the ball, average defensively. Probably their biggest weakness is running the ball. And be interesting to see if they're able to run against a Monroe defense that gives up almost 5 yards per carry. Monroe's given up almost 36 points per game. So it does look like Southern Miss gets the win and becomes bowl eligible.
UL Lafayette and Texas State up next, 5 o'clock Eastern, 229-230 minus 5. That's the Raging Cajuns as the road favorite, 45 being the total in San Marcos, Texas.
Yeah, a lot of these teams obviously stepped up in class last week and played some of those like ACC and SEC, non-conference games. Louisiana Lafayette was one of them, and they lost 59-17 at Florida State. Huge step down in class now against Texas State, who actually only played Arkansas State last week and was actually a favorite of a touchdown in that game. So once again, unless Louisiana is really beat up from the Florida State game, I think it'll serve them well stepping down in class a bit. Neither team throws the ball well. They're both about a yard per pass below average when you factor in the weak opponents they've played. So with the limited passing attack in this game, it actually gets me looking at the under. And 45.5 was the opener. It's 45. It's a low total, but I don't think it's low enough.
MTSU and FIU, second to last game here, guys. We get the MTSU side, minus 20-point road favorites making the trip from Murfreesboro, Tennessee to West Miami. 55 being the total.
Yeah, a huge favorite here, obviously. Florida International, surprisingly, 4-7 straight up, but they're only 4-7 against the number. They're not a good team. They're being outscored by almost 20 points per game. They're being outgained by almost a yard and a half per play. And everyone got excited when they beat Charlotte, who's a really bad 1A team. They beat Louisiana Tech, but they've come right back down to earth. They've gone 0-3 straight up in ATS. They've scored 7 points or less in each of their past 2 games. So once again, they have absolutely no backdoor cover potential, Drew. They average almost 2 yards per pass below average when you factor in the weak opponents. So it'd be Middle Tennessee or pass in this one.
Last one, heading to the Mountain West here, guys. 2-3-3, 2-3-4, last game on the rotation here for this weekend, college football. 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific kick. We're seeing the Air Force Falcons running that option, Steve. Minus 1.5 point, as high as minus 2 if you check in the offshores, as the slight road favorites. 43.5 being the total in San Diego, California.
Yeah, and the line move is interesting because, like you said, it's gone up from 1 to 1.5, but there are a lot of twos at the sharp offshore books. So it does look like the sharp side, the sharp money has been coming in on Air Force in this game for what it's worth. 3 straight wins. Of course, handicapping Air Force games is all about the opponent stopping the triple option. San Diego State's been very average against the run this year, and coming into this game, they have a extra day off because they played last Friday, but they don't have a bye week. One of my favorite angles, by the way, in college football is when a team has a bye and they're facing the option, they're always a lot better, but when they don't, it's more difficult. They do have 1 extra day of prep time. Just played New Mexico. It wasn't much of a challenge. I can see why there's some sharp money coming in on Air Force.
Steve, great stuff as always. Obviously knows his college football, guys. On that 12-2 run, WagerTalk.com and NBA. Read it a couple times here, guys. Number 2 ranked in the NBA sides last season. Steve, any final thoughts for the show before we shut it down? And can you leave us with the most confident play of the games we talked about? Which one you like the most?
Yeah, Drew, first of all, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, everybody out there, all the viewers. And thanks for having me on. I always love doing this with you. Hope to maybe get another one in before the season winds down. And all sports, this is a great time of year to be an all sports client. College football, pro football, college basketball, pro basketball, basically on a daily basis. Last week I made an offer at WagerTalk that if you buy December, you get the rest of November for free. Since I made that offer last week, I've gone 12-2, 86%. So everyone that jumped on board has gone 12-2 for free. Not too late to get the rest of November this next week for free when you buy December. No promo code needed. Steve Merril, WagerTalk.com. We'll go back to where we started. The first game we talked about. Let's look at the over 64 in that Notre Dame USC game. Each team a perfect 5-0 over the total their last 5 games. That's 10-0 over if you've played these overs recently. And Notre Dame is one of those teams that the odds makers are having trouble priced correctly because they were so bad offensively the first half of the season. They've been really good. 35 points or more the last 5, 41 or more 3 of those 5. USC below average defensively. Trojans Irish over the total on Saturday.
Steve Merril, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Steve. Great stuff as always. Happy Thanksgiving out there. We'll be right back with Tony Mejia, part number 3 of the Every Game on the Board podcast. Please smash that like button. Feel free to comment below. Cash those tickets.